In a few days' time, on the 31st of October, a lot of people in the Western world will be celebrating what's called Halloween. I know when I was a child, there was no such thing in Australia, but I was aware that it was in America. Well, for about the last 20 years now, it's very much infiltrated here throughout Australia. I dare say my thoughts today, is there anything godly or biblical about Halloween? Is it something that connects with Christianity? But when you actually look into the history of Halloween, it's very obvious that that is not the case. I'll read a few things on the history of it right here. Halloween is the celebration observed in many countries on the 31st of October, on the eve of the Western Christian feast of All Saints' Day. What it is really is it's connected very much to the Orthodox churches rather than the general Christianity, the world of Christianity. The main Orthodox churches have lots of holy days and rituals and all the many things that don't come out of the Bible, but are very much connected to paganism. Reading on here, just a little some things I looked up. One theory holds that many Halloween traditions were influenced by Celtic harvest festivals, particularly the Gaelic festival of Samhain, which are believed to be of pagan origins. So it makes you wonder why in our country these days that with the enlightenment of Christianity that we'd want to go back to following anything pagan, but many things in the Orthodox churches are far more of pagan origin than Christianity. It's all sort of muddled up together. So what the Bible doesn't mention Halloween, by the way, but it does talk about people that do weird things like Halloween. When you think of all the funny things that go with it, the devils and the witches and the jack-o'-lanterns, horror faces, and it really borders on all the things like witchcraft and evil things. And here we are celebrating this thing called Halloween. I'm just looking at some scriptures that might throw some light on that whole world of things that people like doing in the name of being spiritual, but it's certainly not biblical spiritual. Right back in the book of Leviticus, in chapter 20, it says, "The soul that turneth after such as have familiar spirits, and after wizards, to go whoring after them, I will even set my face against that soul, and will cut them off from among my people." So very early on, right back in the writings of Moses and the law, it was clear that God doesn't want us to go in that particular direction. Later on, one of the great kings, or bad kings of Judah, a guy called Manasseh, made his sons pass through the fire and observed times and used enchantments and dealt with familiar spirits and wizards. He brought much wickedness in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger. You know, it records the time, that great story of the prophet Elijah, when he called down fire upon the pagan gods of Baal, that he at some point sort of convinced himself that he was the only godly man around the place and said to God, "You've only got me." And God came back and said, "No, there's another 7,000 you don't know of." And what was the main thing they had in their favour? They did not bow their knee to Baal. So it's actually, you could almost say it's God's number one hate, is idol worship or anything to do with paganism and so on. Later on in Exodus chapter 7, I'll read, "Then Pharaoh called all the wise men and the sorcerers and the magicians to do their enchantment." This is when Moses was challenging Pharaoh about the children of Israel and what they were doing to them. And we know they threw their rods down on the ground and they became serpents. But what Pharaoh had on his side, his so-called spiritual people, were wise men and sorcerers and magicians that used enchantments. You know, later on in the book of Daniel, when Nebuchadnezzar had the dream and he wanted somebody to come and tell him what the dream was, he turned to such people. In chapter 2 of Daniel, we read there, the king commanded to call all the magicians and the astrologers and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans, and so it goes on, these people that are sort of surrounding the throne there. But to put it quite plainly, they're all crooks. The whole lot of them are crooks. They wish to deceive people. I made a bit of a list of well-known people, I believe, in that category. And I'll just read the list out as I've written them down here. Fortune tellers, tea leaf readers, palm readers, seances, witches, black magic, white magic, talking to the dead, Ouija boards, ghosts, evil spirits, doctrines of devils, tricksters, the occult, exorcism, clairvoyance, sorcerers. We think of Simon the sorcerer in Acts chapter 8, horoscope, astrology. One part there talks about them reading the liver, a very pagan thing. Some forms of hypnosis, putting people into a trance and making them do foolish things. I understand some forms of hypnosis, helpful medically. But there's others. I know when I was a child, we used to go and have the great, whatever his name was, would come to town, and we'd all go down to the local theatre in Port Lincoln where I was brought up, and we'd listen to this person, particularly when he'd call people out of the audience and hypnotise them, put them into a trance, and make them do stupid things. So we're mainly talking, though, today about Halloween and just sort of connecting it to all this other rubbish, because that's really what it is. Just reading here about the time of King Josiah, a good king, as opposed to Manasseh, who was a bad king just before him. It says, in the 18th year of King Josiah, wherein this Passover was holden to the Lord in Jerusalem, moreover the workers with familiar spirits and the wizards and the images and the idols and all the abominations that were spied in the land of Judah and in Jerusalem did Josiah put away. He got rid of them all, that he might perform the words of the law which was written in the book of that Hilkiah the priest found in the house of the Lord. It's a great story there of Josiah when he wanted to do right things, but he didn't quite know what the Bible said because they weren't using the Bible. That's what happens when you get away from the Bible. All this other rubbish comes in. But once he had the Bible read to him, he then turned to the Lord, and he realised that these other things should not be there, and he got rid of all them. And you know, in the book of Isaiah chapter 8, there's a reference to this sort of thing, a little bit difficult to understand in the King James Version, where it seems to be talking about the God of Israel. But in actual fact, I went back and had a look at a translation earlier, back in the 1300s, by one of the great original Bible translator, Wycliffe. And he gave a far better explanation of Isaiah chapter 8 and verse 19. And we just see there that verse 18, verse 19 there, and he says here, when they say to you, this is people that are doing the wrong thing, not people leading you in the right direction, when they say to you, ask ye of conjurers and of false diviners who gnash in their enchantments, shall not the people ask their gods for a revelation? In the King James, it's got G with God with a capital G, which indicates the God of Israel. Now, this is talking about the God of the pagan gods. Shall not the people ask their gods for a revelation? Yea, a word from the dead to the living. When you read in the King James, it's a little confusing what it's talking about. But it's talking very much about where people are advised to go into the occult, into things like that, and go to enchantments and things like that, to get a revelation from the pagan gods, and to to go to the dead, as people do, to talk about what we should do in the living. But then it says in verse 19, in Isaiah chapter 8, to the law and to the testimony, if they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. So really, Halloween, in a sense, I guess it's pretty harmless, you might say, but if it's connected to Christianity or church life at all, then it's wrong, and it should not be. And to me, it would be better to steer right away from it. You know, in the New Testament, when Paul was advising Timothy, he said there to him, I besought thee to abide still at Ephesus, when I went into Macedonia, that thou mightest charge them that they teach no other doctrine. Don't give heed to fables and endless genealogies. It's just so many things that you can get sidetracked into. A number of times he says this, but I might just jump ahead here and just read a little bit of other history I've got written down about Halloween. Halloween roots date back 2,000 years. Another comment here, the term Halloween is derived from All Saints' Eve, and the Orthodox Church's celebration of All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day on the 1st and 2nd of November, which can be traced back to the 8th and 9th century. This old tradition has come through, but it's become incredibly popular, as you know. And children, and I often think adults, don't do good by children if they lead them and encourage them into things that are not biblical. You know, the Bible talks about monthly prognostinators, amazing term that people can get involved in. It talks about magicians, soothsayers, witches, people that must, the list just goes on and on and on. You know, it's interesting that it happens to fall, Halloween happens to fall in our countries, in our Western countries, particularly America, now into other countries connected with America, that it happens to fall on the 31st of October. Well, in actual fact, there's something else far better to celebrate on the 31st of October. And number one was the Balfour Declaration was ratified with three major countries in the First World War in 1917, when 1917, on 31st of October, they ratified the Balfour Declaration, which was the promise to the Jews of a home in the land of Palestine. Now, the other thing that happened exactly the same year, 31st of October 1917, one was happening in England between France and Germany and England, not Germany, France and the USA and America, that they would set aside that home. But also, right on that day, 31st of October 1917, was when the Australian light horse regained the wells of Beersheba, a great famous battle on horseback. So taking of the wells of Beersheba connects to Abraham, by the way. So that was a historic time, turning point one of the great turning points in the First World War. So I would far rather maybe celebrate something historic like that than to pick up some pagan origin sort of festival called Halloween. So for me in my house, I think we would rather serve the Lord, like Joshua said. Let's serve the Lord. Let's not get into anything connected to paganism. God's number one hatred. You know, and in the book of Revelation, it talks about those that are going to be in the 1,000 years with Christ that have not been involved in any way with worshipping the beast and all to do with him. All of that thing, you don't want anything to do with it. You want to get as far away from it as you can. So Halloween really is pagan far more than Christian. So my thought is maybe just leave it right there and turn to the Lord. Thank you.